joined here by Jeanette, who is going to share a really incredible story of things that she's endured in her life and how she really came to San Diego and began going to college. So first, if you would just share with us where you grew up.
I grew up in Sacramento in North Highlands, and then I want to say 6th grade and up, I lived in Yuba City, which is about 45 minutes north of Sacramento.
Okay, and when you were really young, what did you envision doing for your life when you grew up? Did you ever kind of have any dreams?
No, not really.
Okay, so you were just going to school,
remember.
nothing you remember? And how many in your family?
My family's fairly small. I have one sister who's 4 years older than me, and my grandparents, and one blood uncle, and that's about it.
So you grew up there and left Sacramento around what age?
I left Sacramento when I was about 10 and a half, 11.
Okay, and you moved to?
Yuba City.
Yuba City.
That'll be Sutter County.
Okay, and then how long did you live there?
I lived there until I graduated high school.
Graduated high school.
Mm-hmm.
And you graduated high school. At that time, did you have any goals or dreams in your life of things you'd one day want to do?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. Did you ever think you were going to go to college?
No. To be
No?
honest, no, I didn't.
Okay. Now, what kind of work do you do right now?
Right now, I'm a legal assistant at a civil litigation and corporate law firm
Okay,
in
so
La
you,
Jolla.
so you have a keen interest in law,
Yes, I do.
the legal system.
Yes.
Okay. So at what point did you actually move to San Diego?
I moved to San Diego shortly after graduation, which was about the year 2000.
Okay, and what brought you to San Diego?
There is a series of events that led me to move to San Diego, to be honest. Where should I begin?
Well, first, and I'm assuming that this is the issue where your mother was killed when you were young. And so let's just start off first. How old were you when your mother was killed?
I was 10.
So before 10 years old, take us a few years back and just describe the relationship with your mom. Things that you remember that you really loved about her. What really stands out to you?
We're very close. She was a feisty woman, to say the least, but we were all very close. We had a very close family.
That feistiness, was that something that you think is carried on in your life where you have a real strong drive?
Oh, definitely.
So that's where you kind of got that from your mom.
Yes.
Okay, so you have this fairly tight relationship with your mom.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, take us maybe a little before, what was going on in her life before she was actually killed?
Well, I guess to get to that point, you have to go even a few years before that. So I guess we should start with my biological father. Great man. Made a few bad decisions in his life. He fell into some easy money and ultimately ended up paying the price for it. He got about 7 to 9 years for selling methamphetamines and running a meth lab. He was dimed out by a friend of his, and he wouldn't give up the names of people that he was affiliated with, and that tacked on a few more years to his term. So he went to prison when, I want to say I was 5.
And do you remember him before he went to prison? Do you remember a relationship with him, or
Oh,
just
yeah.
kind of what do you remember?
I'm a total daddy's girl,
Okay.
completely. So he went to prison, and we had visitation rights once a month, about 2 hours north of Sac. I think the town's called Livermore. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So after he went to prison, my mom and my father divorced, and life was pretty hard after that. I mean, she was a woman who spoke broken English, and now she's raising 2 daughters, and you go from living a fairly comfortable, luxurious life to basically being borderline poverty-stricken. I can only imagine what she had to go through. So
that was a huge adjustment for you as well.
yes. But I mean, I was young, so I don't think it affected me as much. So I adapted.
What kind of work did she do?
God, odd end jobs. Like I said, she had a hard time speaking English. She ended up getting a job. I forget the name of the company, but basically, she washed and cleaned linens for like restaurants and a laundry type facility. My sister's 4 years older than me. Yes.
And you and her, would you describe where you guys were pretty close throughout all this time?
We were not close at all.
Okay.
I think we weren't close because a lot of the times she was kind of forced to hang out with me. My mom kind of forced her to take me everywhere, and I think it annoyed her. And plus, a 4-year gap is a pretty strong gap, especially when you're 14 and your sister's 10 years old. So we weren't tight at all, to be
So
honest.
she was tired of babysitting all the time.
Basically, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think I drove her crazy.
Okay.
So,
So your mom and you have a pretty decent relationship,
Mhm.
and then did she get involved in any other relationships after she divorced your natural father?
a few relationships here and there. Men that really weren't worthy of her time, to be honest. And she ended up meeting a man who was introduced to her by the name of Dennis, and he was in the Coast Guard. And I want to say, I could be wrong, I think he was a chief petty officer in the Coast Guard at the time, but like I said, I could be wrong. And basically, he offered her the world.
How did he meet her?
That's a strange story. He actually met her through my grandfather.
Okay. Now, so she basically goes from having this strained relationship with, that was with your divorce, and then he goes to prison.
Mhm.
So she's probably looking to do everything she can to provide for you guys. You think that had something to do with her seeing someone that had really a good life, if you will, because he was in the military and the Coast Guard, that most girls would say, wow, this guy is really responsible?
True. He was a friend of my grandfather, so automatically you think he's a good guy. He has a great career. He offers her basically a roof over her head. He offers her stability. He offers to love her and to take on 2 daughters that aren't even his kids. And what more could my mom basically ask for,
Mm-hmm.
So,
So time goes on, and they were together for how many years before she actually passed away?
I want to say it wasn't long at all. I think they ended up marrying about 1.5 to 2 years into the relationship. I want to say about a year. About a
Okay.
year. They get married, and he buys her a house in North Highland, Sacramento, a pretty decent 2-story house.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is being in the Coast Guard, he was out to sea more often than he was home. And I think after a certain period of time, that kind of takes a toll on a relationship. Some women can handle that and some women can't. And a lot of friction started developing between the two, and I think a lot of resentment started coming from my mom because he was never there.
Sure.
So she became fairly unhappy, and on his last tour out to sea, it was his last time he was going to be out to sea, she basically tells him that she wants a divorce. So
she basically just tells him that, and then he goes out to sea after hearing that?
I think she tells him this while he's at sea. I can't be positive with that because I was fairly young at the time. He comes back from sea, and he's served divorce papers. And I remember about a week before her disappearance, they got into a fairly big argument in the house, and it escalated to something physical. And I remember my mom screaming for my sister.
So now that you got all this really drama going on in the house,
Yes.
you guys are knowing that your mom and your stepdad are not getting along. You guys are knowing that she's really not happy because she
Oh, yeah.
feels like he's absent the whole time.
And of course he doesn't want a divorce. So they get into a really big fight one night. And I remember I'm 10 years old, mind you, and I hear my mom screaming for my sister to help her. And I look through my bedroom door, and I can see him with my mom pinned down on the bed, and he has his hands around her throat. And he's screaming at her, "I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you." And I'm completely paralyzed. And I felt like such a coward, but at 10 years old, I was just paralyzed. I could not move. And she's screaming for my sister, and I'm standing here just behind this door like a coward, and I'm just watching because I can't do anything. I can't bring myself to move.
Right.
And I don't remember what happens exactly after that, but I think my sister came running in the room and kind of broke it up. So from that moment on, my mom started sleeping in our room. She started sleeping on the floor because she didn't feel safe
So
being in the
she was
same house.
afraid of him
She
now.
was afraid of him.
And you guys were probably afraid of him as well.
Yes. He was the kind of man that would come home and he would have gifts from my sister and I, and he would kind of try to buy our affection.
Mm-hmm. Was there
But you
times
could see
where
right
you,
through it.
so you really, it wasn't legitimized for you? You kind of felt like it was just a front, it wasn't real?
I just felt like he was trying to buy our love, basically. We never really connected with him on an emotional level. I think he tried too hard. And
Now, were you still keeping in touch with your real dad?
yes, we would go see him once a month, and it was great. Like I said, I was a daddy's girl. I think my sister, however, was not nearly as close with my dad as I was.
Now, did he ever ask you, like, how's your mother doing? Did you ever get the opportunity to kind of share with him, or did that kind of not come up?
No, because our visitation was limited in time, so I think he just focused on my sister and I when we were there. And he might have talked to my grandparents about my mom, but, you know, it never came up around me. So after that big fight where I see him assaulting my mom, I believe he tried to take my mom out and reconcile the next day, and I think his advances were basically rebuffed. And it was our day to go see my father in prison, and we woke up the next morning and my mom's laying on the floor, and we get up, we get ready, we say goodbye to my mom, and my grandparents come pick us up. And that was the normal routine, you know. Grandparents took us, we came back, she was there, no big deal. It was normal. So the day that she went missing, we were in Livermore visiting my father, and we came home, and I want to say it's about 5 or 6. My dates and time might be a little bit off, but we came home, and it was getting dark, and we pull up in front of our house, and Dennis, my stepfather, comes walking out of the house as we are getting out of the car, and he looks straight at my grandparents, and he says, "Yeah, Pon's inside." Pon was my mother's name. And so my grandparents were like, "That's fine." They let me and my sister out. Me and my sister go towards the house, and my grandparents leave. So we get to the front door, and we open it, and I don't know what it was, but there was a feeling of uneasiness in the house. It was dim in the house, and it felt so quiet, like it was just awkward. And my sister stood in the doorway, and she grabbed my arm at that moment as if she just knew something wasn't right. And we looked for my mom, and she wasn't there. And so we ended up calling my grandparents, and my sister is talking to my grandparents on the phone, and she's saying, you know, Mom's not here. And my grandparents were like, "Are you sure? You know, Dennis said she was in the house." And my grandparents, I think, told my sister and I to wait a little bit longer to see if she showed up. And so we waited, and she never showed up. And so we called our grandparents again, and they came back to pick us up because they didn't want us staying in the house alone with Dennis.
Now, why?
With a series of events that were occurring, my grandparents knew my mom was filing for divorce. They knew the fights they were getting into, and all of a sudden she's not there. It was completely out of character for my mom to not be there. So they felt something.
They really felt something.
They had a little inkling of something, and they came and picked us up, and we stayed at my grandparents' house for about a week. And during that week, there was no sign of her. The night that she did go missing, my grandfather called the police and tried to report her missing, and of course, you have to wait, I think, 48 hours before you can do a missing persons report. So we went and stayed at my grandparents' house for about a week. And
now, what is Dennis saying to you all? Because he's home at the time. Are you guys, when you're looking for your mom, is he saying, "Yeah, I wonder where she's at"? I mean, what's going on with him at this point?
His story has kind of changed. You know, when we first got there, he told us, "Yeah, she's inside." And then when my grandparents arrived and picked us up that night, he told my grandparents, "Oh, you know, she left walking earlier today. She went off walking. She went to go see a friend." And it was just little things like that just they weren't adding up. So we stayed with my grandparents for about a week, and that's when we were delivered the news.
So, but for this week, in your mind, you knew your mom would never have abandoned you.
No.
So you knew, you were worried and starting to feel like maybe he had done something to her?
Being 10 at the time, not as many thoughts crossed my mind. I think I was oblivious to what was really going on. And my grandparents tried to keep everything positive. They tried to keep my mind off of what was really going on. So
now the news, now during this time you're at your grandparents, Dennis is not communicating with you all?
No.
So who is the one that brings the news about your mother?
To this day, I'm not sure who actually told or informed my grandparents. I remember the day I actually found out. I'm outside playing, and I remember my grandparents specifically telling me to stay outside for a while. And I didn't understand why, but being 10, I'm like, okay, so I'm outside playing, with the kids, the neighborhood kids. And I start noticing, a few cars pulling up to my grandparents' house, a couple, not too many, and I notice people going in my grandparents' house. And at the same time, they're telling me to wait outside. And of course, I'm oblivious. I'm like, okay, I'll stay outside. And I want to say about a couple hours pass by, and I think my sister yells out for me to come inside. And so I walk in the house, and everyone is just sobbing. Like, there's just, I want to say my grandma's close friends, everyone was crying and like holding each other. And no one was saying anything to me. And I'm walking through this house, and it just seems like a mansion because I'm walking and just thoughts are racing through my head. And it's like at that moment, you already know what you're going to hear. And my grandfather took me to the backyard, and he's walking with me as if he's mustering up the courage to tell me. And we're walking for a while in silence. And he just stops me and he looks at me. And he says, "She's gone." And I collapsed in his arms, and he just held me. And he just held me for a while. And I ran to my room, and I locked myself in there, and I wouldn't come out. I wouldn't eat. I wouldn't sleep. I was a mess. I was a mess.
And where's your sister at this point?
I don't even know.
In your mind, are you thinking, I wonder who did this, or are you thinking Dennis did something to her?
We all knew instantly who it was. I mean, without a doubt, we knew who it was.
So they had found your mother's body at the river.
It turns out that a fisherman who was actually a retired police officer, I don't recall if he was a retired sheriff or a retired police officer, he was fishing in the Sacramento River, and his hook caught onto a bag, and he reels the bag in, and he thinks it's a bag of junk. And so he goes to throw the duffel bag aside, and he sees hair sticking out of the duffel bag. And it was my mom's nude body, I mean completely nude, no jewelry, everything had been taken off. And the coroner had said that if her body had been in the water one more day, they would not have been able to identify her body. That's how bad her body was decomposed. It was luck. I mean, what are the chances of one small hook grabbing on to a bag that's been weighed down with cement blocks? It's unlikely. So we're very fortunate. An autopsy report was ran, and on the actual report itself, it says undetermined as the cause of death, but the coroner found traces of carbon monoxide in her system, and which led police to think that she was poisoned with carbon monoxide before she was thrown in the river. And so
now this is in the media. I've seen some of the newspaper stories on this. So this is out in the media. Are friends calling you, trying to console you, or is there just kind of a cutoff from everybody at this point?
No, we have a lot of friends and family calling. Everyone wants to get to the bottom of it. You know, they want justice.
And Dennis is just living at home as if nothing were happening?
You know what? To be honest, I don't know what really happened with him. I was informed as I got older that the day that a woman's body was discovered, he had called police that night asking if they had identified the body of that person. And he had told police that if it was his wife, he would be the chief suspect. So it was weird that he would even call and ask a question like that or even make a statement like that. So that caught everybody off guard as well. Like, you just basically named yourself as the key suspect.
Now, he was not immediately arrested, right?
No, he wasn't.
So how much time went by before they actually took him into custody?
We never had enough hard evidence. Everything that we had was circumstantial. 2 years went by. He was free for 2 years.
Did he ever have any interaction with you over that 2-year period?
Not that I can recall.
But he's just going to work every day
He's
as if
going to
nothing ever
work.
happened?
He's close to retirement.
So he's still in the Coast Guard?
He's still in the Coast Guard. He's close to retirement, and he's living his life.
And at what point did you finally get to go see your dad and kind of break down with him and tell him what happened?
I never told him what happened. I think my grandparents informed him, and like, there's parts of my memory that I think I've blocked out, to be honest. Of course, my father was upset. I mean, he loved my mom dearly. I mean, that love never went away. So, my mom's funeral took place, and my father was released for that day to attend my mom's funeral. And Dennis was at the funeral, and he sat there in the front row without an ounce of emotion on his face. He did not shed one tear. He did not give. He didn't talk to anybody. He sat there, stone cold.
And did your dad try to talk to him or say anything to him?
No, my dad was. He had
Guards, of course.
guards. He had to stand at a distance. So
So you're seeing Dennis. You know, they're probably, lowering the casket into the ground. Here's the man that in your mind and your heart you knew had done it.
and there was nothing we could do.
And you just, what were you feeling? What were you thinking? Just frustration? Were you thinking that he's going to get away with this?
I think everyone was more in shock. Just the way he was when he was there. I mean, your wife just died, and you're saying that you had nothing to do with it, but you have not one tear in your eye, and this is the woman that you love so much. It's hard to explain what you're thinking at that time.
Now, at the time, are you ever getting angry at God, at the world? Like, how are you dealing and internalizing all these emotions, having, gone through something that very few people have ever lived through?
I think I was in denial at that point. I don't think I was letting myself grieve the way I should have. I think I blocked a lot of it out. I blocked a lot of emotion out. And being so young, I don't think I really understood what was really taking place. I don't think any of it really hit me the way it should have.
So time goes on, and Dennis it's nearing the time when he's taken into custody. Are you being told now, hey, we think we might have something? Or are you guys really not sure what's happening and were taken by surprise when they actually arrested him?
My grandfather was very involved, more involved than he ever told me. My grandfather being in the Coast Guard as well, he sacrificed a lot to be here pursuing this case. He turned down about 3 or 4 promotions because of this case, because he wanted to be here with the family. And ultimately, he was forced to retire early because of his dedication to my mom's case.
Do you think part of what motivated him is him feeling horrible for the fact that he introduced this horrendous individual to your mom?
Possibly.
Yeah.
It's a possibility.
So all of a sudden they take him into custody where? At his job? At home?
Well, before that, the DA of Sacramento ended up changing jurisdictions. So I'm not exactly sure the reasoning why. I don't know if it was because of where her body was actually found or what, but it was transferred from Sacramento DA to Sutter County DA. And we ended up moving to Sutter County shortly thereafter.
Because of this case?
I thought it was because we wanted a fresh start, but as I got older, I realized it was because we wanted to be where the case was. We wanted to make sure this man was being put behind bars. And so we moved to Sutter County. That's when I was in 6th grade. Some time went by, and the DA and prosecutors in Sutter County would not give up. They were determined to put him behind bars. They were determined to do everything in their power to get this man. And after 2 years of him running free, the district attorney was like, you know what, we're taking everything we got and we're going for it. We're just going to go for it. So they got their warrants, and they arrested him in front of all of his superior officers on the military base in Alameda. And that's when it began.
Now, you go from this huge injustice of of seeing the man that deep down you knew had killed your mom, and he's running free like it's nothing.
Sickening.
What was it like, though, seeing the DA pursuing this, where seems like you could clearly tell that they went above and beyond in saying, this man's not getting away with this? Did that help restore a little bit of what justice was all about for you, or do you even remember kind of what you were thinking at the time?
It was nice to know that someone cared that much. And normally you don't hear stories about the district attorney really being there to help you, or, certain prosecutors, they give, a halfway job, and you don't see them really putting all their effort into it. And they did for my mom's case. They would not stop. They put as much evidence on the table as they could, and they just gung-ho went for it. They weren't waiting any longer.
Now, when you would see them, there were times when you would maybe meet or come across their path in meetings or whatever?
I had, I think, one initial interview, and to be honest, I don't remember what was even said in that interview. It was so long ago, and I may have just blocked that memory out. But I spoke with them a few times, but I can't even recall what was said between us.
Did you feel a kind of a connection with them, or a bond, because they were there to make justice for your mom?
Yeah. They were very good guys. Very good guys.
Times, where he's gotten arrested now, and I'm assuming that the media is all over this. Were people shocked, or were they knew it was going to happen? It was just a matter of time.
It was just a matter of time. I don't think anybody was shocked. He was shocked.
So he was shocked.
Oh yeah, I think he thought he was free. I mean, 2 years had gone by. He probably didn't think anything was going to happen to him. He was about 5 months, I want to say, before retirement, before he was arrested, and I think he was taken by surprise.
So he gets arrested, and then now the court procedures start, and they had to have been pretty long.
Yes. And
you had to testify at some of this, correct?
God, I did everything in my power to avoid testifying, but the judge believed that at 14, 12, I'm sorry. At 12, I was old enough to testify. They really believed that I was old enough, and I was only 12 years old, and they summoned me, and I had to testify.
Now, there was a newspaper article that really, the reporter clearly was on Dennis's side, and made comments as if you were not being honest. At the time, did you know about that article, or was that something later you learned?
No, I had no idea that article was even printed till maybe a year and a half, 2 years later.
What was that like to have seen someone that doesn't even know you write a story like that?
It's upsetting. Well, what can you do? Freedom of the press. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion and their own judgments. There's not much you can do.
Why do you think he was coming to the defense of Dennis?
It's hard for some people to see a man given a life term based on circumstantial evidence. And I think a lot of people have issues with that.
Okay. Now, throughout the court procedure, it was trial by jury or judge?
Jury.
And so the jurors are in there. Do you have recollection of when you're in there actually speaking and the jury is watching you?
Before the trial started, my biological father was actually released from prison. And my father was there every day of the trial. Unfortunately, my grandparents forced me to go to school during the time, and I made it to maybe 1 or 2 of the sessions. But on the day that I actually testified, I remember sitting out there and just being so nervous. That was probably one of the scariest moments. You're sitting there waiting for them to call your name because you can't go in. And they call my name, and I go in there, and the courtroom is just packed. It's packed full of people. And you see Dennis, and he's just sitting there, and he's staring at you, and it's a very intimidating experience. And so you go up there, and I'm staring at my dad, because I see my dad there, and I look at him, at Dennis, and he's just cold. Like, there's just no emotion in his face. It just surprises me. He never showed emotion or sympathy for anything. And I remember sitting up there, and they asked me what my name was, and you give your full name, and I just sobbed from that point on. I don't think I stopped crying the whole time I testified.
and I had to testify to seeing Dennis put his hands around my mom's throat and threatening to kill her.
As you're talking, is he nodding his head like no or yes or just nothing?
He's smirking.
He's got a smirk on his face.
He has a smirk on his face the whole time. Doesn't say anything, doesn't smile, but he has a smirk. And it's incredibly it's disturbing. It's very disturbing. And you see his family behind him trying to give him support. And
Did you feel like they were kind of against you for your testimony?
my testimony was considered a key testimony. It was a very important testimony to the prosecutors. So I'm sure they disliked me somewhat. They never said anything to me. No one ever said anything to me. I gave my testimony. I was escorted out by the bailiff, and that was the end of that day.
Now you're going home, and then you go home and you're staying with your grandparents at the time?
Yes, I'm staying with my grandparents at the time. My father was also staying with us because he had just got out of prison.
And was he diagnosed with cancer at this time?
I believe he was. It turns out that after my father got out of prison, he noticed he was coughing a lot, and he went in for a checkup, and he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, cancer of the lungs. It turns out that he was exposed to a chemical called Agent Orange when he was in the Vietnam War. And because he was in prison for so long, no one caught it. And by the time he got out, it was just all over. But he never showed any signs of weakness. I mean, he was focused on my mom's case.
So he basically dies from cancer how long after the trial was completed, or
The trial lasted about, I want to say, 2 weeks, and only after about 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty on all charges, and he was sentenced 25 years to life.
Now, were you there when they read the verdict?
No, we were all at home. I think all of us were at home, and the DA's assistant, I forgot her name, but wonderful woman, she came to our house, knocked on the door, and she was just screaming, "He's guilty, he's guilty."
And what went through your mind?
Relief.
Because it's really not something you can, quote, rejoice over because your mom's gone, but it was just that relief of knowing that justice was served.
It's a bittersweet feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Now, from the trial and everything, what was your understanding of what actually happened?
They believe the morning that I went to go visit my father in prison, that my mom had got up to say goodbye to us, and that she fell back asleep on the floor in our room. They think that at that point, Dennis went to the garage and hooked up a hose to either his motorcycle or the lawnmower, and they think that he fed the hose through the window in our room and filled the room with carbon monoxide, and she died, hopefully in her sleep. He then took her body, put it in a duffel bag, a military-issue duffel bag at that, and weighed it down with cement blocks and threw her in the Sacramento River.
So, probably like they think in the morning, like she was still sleeping.
Yeah.
Since the night before.
Mm-hmm.
And when the evidence was circumstantial, and the fact that what was the specific evidence other than your testimony?
The duffel bag was military issued, except for the name had been scratched off. I assume that on military duffel bags they have their names stitched in or stenciled in, and that was not on the bag any longer. It was a Coast Guard duffel bag, so that was one thing. The cinder blocks that were used to weigh down the duffel bag were actually matched the cinder blocks that were in our backyard. When they searched our house after my mom went missing, they found, I want to say they found sites that he had researched the effects of carbon monoxide poisoning. I don't know if it was a site that he went and looked at or if it was information that he had gathered somewhere, but he had information about the effects of carbon monoxide. And it was little things like that, but you can never use that as just hard evidence. Everything is, It's all circumstantial.
Now, throughout all this, you're going to school, and what are kids saying to you? Are they asking you, hey, what happened? Are they just trying to, tell you they love you? What are they saying? How are the kids handling all this?
I think everyone was very supportive. I didn't have anybody ever say anything negative to me. Everybody, teachers, friends, everyone was supportive.
Did your sister and you draw closer together after this?
No. My sister's a lot different from me. She ended up taking on kind of a motherly role, and it made us even grow further apart, because I kind of was like, you're not my mom. Quit acting like my mom. So after the trial, my father started doing chemotherapy, and it didn't work. He did radiation therapy, and it didn't work. And when I was 13 or 14, he passed away. And I think that hit me harder than my mom's death.
Why do you think that?
I may have been closer to my mom, but her death was sudden, and you had hope that she died in peace. But when you watch someone suffer and go through so much pain with cancer, it's horrible. I mean, you watch someone just deteriorate before your eyes, and it's the worst thing to see. I don't wish it on anybody.
What were the fondest memories you had with your dad before he passed on? Conversations you had, deep discussions, him telling you how much he loved you, what kind of things?
He was just a very happy man. I mean, even when God, just everything about him was happy. No matter how much pain he was in, no matter how much he was suffering, he always had to tell a joke. He always wanted to make everyone else laugh. And he was a phenomenal person. Not an enemy in the world. He was just a great man, and I took his death extremely hard. I think everything from that point on just went in a downhill spiral. My life just started going downhill from that point on.
Now, you say it was going downhill. In what respect?
After my father's death, my grades dropped. I used to be a straight A student. My grades dropped to about a C, maybe a D average. I cut school all the time. I was getting involved with the wrong people. At 16, I ended up meeting a guy who's 21, and that was who I spent all my time with. I mean, what business does a 16-year-old have doing with a 21-year-old? And at that time, that's all I wanted in my life. I wanted to be with this older man who was gang related, and I thought it was awesome. And I blew all my family off, I blew my friends off, and I dedicated all my time to this older man.
Did that offer a sense of release, of trying to get away from everything that maybe caused you to keep remembering all the things you had endured that most people have not had to endure?
It did. And at 16, I thought I knew everything. And I hated everyone in my family. And at 16, I moved out of my house, and I went to go live with him. It was my choice, and I was just naive at the time, and I ended up getting involved with someone who became abusive emotionally and mentally. And I was stuck because I had isolated myself from my family. So the last 6 months of my senior year, I ended up going on home studies just to be able to work full time and support myself, because I was supporting myself at 16 and 17 and 18. It was a rough time.
Now, when he was abusive with you, did you ever get flashbacks to that memory of seeing your mom being held by Dennis?
At the time, no. And when I think back about it, I'm like, why would I ever even let myself be in a position like that, especially from my history? Things got worse with him, and he became even more abusive, and I got to the point where I'm like, enough is enough. I started seeing, similarities between me and him that I had seen in my mother and my stepdad, and I had to get out of it.
He let you get out of it? Or was that a struggle?
It was a struggle, and it was a big struggle. I ended up almost breaking my arm because of him, and a lot of other things. And I ended up running, and that's why I'm in San Diego. I ran from him. I ran from my family, and I didn't tell anybody that I was here in San Diego. I left Sacramento when I came here with a good friend of mine, and I didn't look back.
The best move that you probably made?
At the time, I thought it was, but then I get to San Diego, and my own family doesn't even know where I'm at this point. And months go by, and I kind of hit rock bottom. You know, I'm in San Diego, I don't know anybody, and I just realized that I was completely alone. I had absolutely no one, and I did it to myself. I mean, I pushed everyone away, and it was a reality check.
Alienating people, and it seems like so many times we do that when we need people the most. We push them away the most. What do you think it was the reason why you pushed away from them? Was it the memories, or was it pressure?
It was the memories. Yeah, it was the memories. You just want to forget, and you think running helps, and it doesn't.
At what point did you finally make contact and reconnect with them?
About a year after I was in San Diego, I wrote a letter to my sister, letting her know where I was, and I just apologized for everything. I apologized to her, and I didn't expect to hear anything back, and she responded. A few weeks later, I got a letter back from her, and it was the same thing from her. She just apologized for everything that she did or didn't do.
Did this bring your relationship closer?
We're closer than ever now.
So now that bond is just distinguishably different.
Yeah, I had to get over my pride, and I apologized to everyone in my family, and my family is so incredibly close now. We're a very close-knit family. I mean, we talk about everything now.
And they've got to be pretty proud of you. You're working in a law firm, you're going to college. You know, they have to be pretty proud of who you're becoming as a person.
I try every day.
I mean, when I look at you, just from the time that I've known you, you know, it's amazing to me, because I was really stunned to hear the story, that all that you've endured, because you really conceal it phenomenally. You really, you know what I mean? You're a very strong person, and I can just see, connecting the dots now, all the things you've been through, why you're like you are. And you know, a lot of times people don't become that strong person because of things. They break down and turn into, you know, to drugs, and really have a life that never recovers. And yet you've been able to really recover from things that are just stunning. And I wonder now, when you see things on the news with kids being killed, parents being killed, it's got to just hit you in your nerves.
It's horrible. And, you know, you have a choice, and sometimes you make the wrong choices. But God, I looked at it this way. I was doing so many bad things, and I was making so many bad choices, and I just thought to myself one day, if my parents were alive, they would be so ashamed of me. And that's when I just told myself my life was going to be different. I wasn't going to live a horrible life. I wanted them to be proud of me, and I wanted my family to be proud of me. So I try every day to make them happy.
There's times that you kind of daydream and just kind of conversate with your mom and with your dad ever?
Not as much as I used to. I probably should a little more often, but I don't. You know, life is hectic, and but you never forget.
And then with friends now, you know, there are a lot of your friends that really don't even know your story.
They know that my parents have passed on. A lot of them don't know the exact details of my story. It isn't something that I like to, you know, broadcast, but they know I've been through some pain.
No, it's also interesting, you and your sister handled this thing so completely different than each other, and alienated each other, and then now you're brought together. What are the greatest things you've seen in her life that she's been able to, I don't know, perfect? Or what are her strengths now that you see that really just blow you away because of all the things she's been through?
I get my strength from her. When I see her being such a wonderful mom and a person in general, it inspires me to be a better person. So she's a backbone for me. I mean, she truly is. She's a great woman, and I just never appreciated her when I was younger.
And then how do you think she sees you? What strength does she see you for her?
To be honest, I couldn't even answer that question because in my eyes, I'm still just that baby sister to her. And I don't think that would ever change, you know?
You don't think she admires you for certain things, attributes in your life that she says, wow?
She might, but she doesn't express herself too often.
Yeah, that's that typical oldest child.
Yeah, she's stubborn,
Yeah.
so.
What do you think the greatest passion is that it's put in your life? Like, for example, the legal system. Do you attribute your desire to be a part of the legal system, you know, the criminal justice system, because of what you've seen and endured?
Definitely played a large role. My sister went into corrections. I think it inspired her to go into corrections. And me, I would love to go into corrections, but I'm not built to be a correctional officer. So, but I wanted to play my part. You know, I wanted to get involved in some way. And even though I do civil work now, it's a nice feeling. I feel like I'm giving back in some way.
I'm thinking also of young people that take their parents for granted. What do you say to kids, you knowing that you really never probably got to say things that you wish you could have said to your mom that now you can't? What do you say to kids that are taking their parents for granted and they're thinking, you know what, mom's mean because she won't let me go here or there? What do you say to them to give them a glimpse of what you endured?
You'll regret it. You'll truly regret it. Because you can't have those moments back. Regret is the worst thing to have. And I can't stand seeing people fight with their parents because I'm like, you have no idea how lucky you are and how fortunate you are to have people like that in your lives. And it drives me insane because people just take everything for granted, and those small moments, you know, they can just be taken away from you so quickly, and you live your life with regret, and it's the worst feeling in the world to live with regret.
Now, where do you see yourself 5 years from now, 5 to 10 years from now? Where do you hope to see yourself?
Hopefully in law school. Hopefully.
And what do you want to do in law school? What type of law do you want to specialize in?
I originally wanted to do criminal law, but now I'm thinking civil law.
Is there a reason?
I'm good at it.
So now all the tricks of the trade you're learning in the law firm, you're starting to just see and get a kind of a desire for things and looking and researching, or what is it that really gets you going when you're working on civil cases?
It's a wonderful learning experience, and I work with a great group of people that inspire me every day to become a better person, and they push me to just excel in everything that I do. And I'm very fortunate to have such positive influences in my life because, you know, not everyone has those kind of people around them. So I like the legal field. I like a lot of things about it, but I wouldn't mind learning more about criminal law.
And do they know your story at your work?
A couple of them, not in depth.
I know people that don't like to talk about their past, and yet, like for me, hearing your story has just given me a whole new just respect for who you are as a person, what you've overcome, and just seeing just the strength, you know, that you have. And I mean, it's phenomenal. And I hope you never forget the impact you can have on other people by sharing, like telling young people not to take their parents for granted and all those things. I mean, because you experienced something that most people would never ever have the tragic circumstances to have to deal with stuff like that. You know. You have questions? I know.
How old were your parents when they passed?
My mom was 32, and my father, I want to say, was early 40s. I want to say was in his early 40s. They were both pretty young.
And grandparents, are they your maternal grandparents or paternal?
My grandmother is, My grandfather is not my blood grandfather, but he's raised me since he's the only grandfather I've ever known. So I consider him my blood grandfather, yeah.
On your mom's side?
Mm.
And Dennis's sentence, when is he paroled, or is he going? Is he gone?
He was sentenced to 25 years to life, but he's up for parole in 2013 on good behavior.
And you plan on being there, I'm assuming.
Well, I'll be there.
I bet you will. And I have a feeling you're not going to be shy.
No, I'll be
You know?
there.
That's
Yeah.
good. That's good.
So,
Are they still,
oh, they're alive and kicking. Drive me nuts all the time, but they're wonderful, and you don't realize how much they actually sacrificed until you get older. Like as a child, I didn't appreciate them, and as I get older, and I'm still learning things to this day that they did that I never knew about. They hit a lot for me, and I've kind of been forcing more information out of them every time I see them, but
That you're learning more and more that you never knew, and the sacrifices they made and all the
Mhm.
things they endured for you.
yeah.
Wow. And how old are you now?
I am 27.
When you get a lot of those, or who had those, or the book that you have is, I mean, you have a lot on.
Actually, there's probably twice as many articles. I found those out of clippings during the trial, and I saved them. My sister has just about every article that was written on my mom's case, but everything that I could find, I just took it for myself without telling anybody. So
When Augustine was sharing his story about
Mhm.
Javier, was that bringing back a lot of memories from you of what it's like to lose someone?
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was. But the difference is, I had everyone fighting on my side to solve the case, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, it didn't seem like he had that same support. So that's rough for him.
And that's why I asked you how much it meant to you to have them. Because I don't think law enforcement realize the difference it makes for the victim's family,
Mhm.
for them to be fighting for them for justice or undermining justice. And I've noticed that with Augustine's family, the greatest hurt that I've seen in them is seeing that no one cares. That's been the hardest thing that I've
Yeah.
seen them battle.
The funny thing is a few years after my mom's case, I ran into the district attorney, and I'm sure he didn't know. He had no clue who I was, but of course I remembered him. And I remember I walked up to him and I said, "Thank you." And he had no clue who I was. And I just looked at him and I said, "Thank you." Matt Beecham was his name. He was amazing. And he never stopped fighting, and he had no clue who I was, but I was in his face and I was saying thank you. And this was years later.
Well, thank you so much, because I know this was difficult, and I know that you reluctantly agreed to do this interview.
It's forced.
Forced, coerced, but I think that you'll be surprised at really how much it is going to be a blessing to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So thank you.